Welcome to Exit Paradox, where we explore what actually happens after a successful business exit. I'm your host, Anastasia Koroleva.
What am I doing here? Like, why am I working? What's my purpose? And all these existential questions started coming through. And it was definitely difficult because I thought I was happy. And obviously someone outside would describe me as happy, but inside there was something missing.
My friend Radia doesn't just build businesses. He builds momentum. He's a 3-time tech founder and a prolific angel investor. Since his last exit 2 years ago, he's been building Blissgrowth, a venture studio that partners exclusively with exited founders. Why did he choose this path? What has he learned so far? Was it the right move? For a while, Jay also co-hosted the Joyful Entrepreneur podcast, a top 10 show about success and happiness. Today, we explore how Jay is designing his venture studio not just for financial success, but for joy, purpose, and meaning. And what he's learned from both his own journey and the many post-exit founders he works with. Hi, Jay. So it finally is happening. You're here in the studio. It took me a while to persuade you.
Yes.
So I'm very excited you're here.
Awesome.
Because you and I have had the most fascinating conversations, and I know how much wisdom you have, which is very relevant to my audience. So if you don't mind, I'd love you to tell us a little bit about Yieldify, because we will focus on that exit first. And then, of course, we'll talk about your whole life, and we will not leave any stone unturned.
Thank you. Well, we set the expectation high. So look, I'll tell you a bit about Yieldify, and then we can chat about the other areas. So Yieldify was my first real company, I'd say. Before that, I'd played around and tried a lot of different things. If I rewind a bit back before that, so I was actually in the corporate world. So after I studied economics at UCL, I then decided to work in banking. I went for a stable job, something which I thought was exciting, working on the trading floor, but I soon realized it probably wasn't for me. My heart was guiding me to, really telling me that I need to do something that is more heartfelt or something that will make me happy. And eventually I was working on a few projects on the side whilst in a corporate job, which was fun. Lots of hours, because you'd be working from 7 to 7, then you're hustling on the side. Yeah. And then, I did that for quite a while, and then it got to a point where I said, look, I want to do this full time. And I did go back and forth, but eventually Yieldify, which was my first company, came through. And the premise behind that was I'm around shopping. So if you go right now to a shop, there's a sales assistant, and they guide you what to buy. And if you rewind 10, 12 years ago in 2013, that would exist. But if you went online, every single visitor on a website would see the same experience. So whether you were a male or female, or if you're buying a present for someone else, or if you were a loyal customer or a first-time customer, you'd all be shown the same experience. So essentially, Yieldify built a technology which was like a front end. It would sit on the top of the website, and it would recognize what type of visitors arrived on the website, and based off that would dynamically change the website. So that was the concept, and it sounded good. Unfortunately, people were interested in the product, and it was one of those ideas which just worked. And we onboarded customers very quickly. It was a venture-backed journey, and we raised money from various VC funds. And it led to a lot of opportunities for me. We had different offices around the world. We had like 1,000 customers. So I lived that journey. But that's where it started, my whole tech journey.
So you sold it 2 years ago. And normally I don't actually invite people to this podcast so early in their journey. But I'm happily making an exception for you, because I think one of the amazing, fascinating things about you personally is just how much you've grown in those 2 years, how much you've learned, how much you've tried. And I'd love you to walk me through that journey emotionally for you. So let's go back to that moment when you sold Yieldify. How did you feel, and what did you think at the time?
So I think I say my journey on like the post exit probably started about 7 years ago. So it wasn't actually with the Yieldify exit. Oddly, my second company, Reach Desk, had an exit for me before Yieldify. So, which was 2 years before that.
Yeah.
So I guess I've had more time to process. And for me, I think what really grew me most on that post-exit paradox, as your podcast is related to, was when I was actually in New York. So I was in New York in 2017, 2018. I was living there, and I still remember the moment. I was in this apartment, a really nice apartment. I treat myself, and I felt I had everything in my life at that moment. Like I had this company, Yieldify, which was doing really well, we're winning all the awards, and all that external aspects of success was there. I had a great family, friends. So I thought I had everything. I was in good shape. Like all the boxes in this external life was ticked. And I still remember I was in this apartment in the center of Manhattan, and I just felt empty. I still remember the exact moment, and I didn't know what it was. It was like literally I had like a tennis ball in my throat or something. I felt this moment of just what is life about, and suddenly all these questions started coming through to me of like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I working? What's my purpose? And all these existential questions started coming through, and it was definitely difficult because I thought I was happy, and obviously someone outside would describe me as happy, but inside there was something missing. And this was all happening whilst I was building my company, so it was a bit strange because normally it happens once you've sold the company. But yeah, for me, that conversation started happening, and that then led me on my journey of trying to discover. I always say this whole journey of post-exit, the founder, there's like 3 phases. There's like the pause phase where you pause and you go, okay, what's just happened in my life over the last 3, 5, 10 years? And like you pause and reflect. And then your second phase is then like you reset and you're trying to figure out, okay, what am I doing right and what needs to be changed and adjusting. And then your third one is like the new chapter, the new you. So like I was going through those phases whilst building my company, which is quite odd probably.
Well, you did exit personally from another company at the time, right?
Yeah, halfway through.
So you had an exit that triggered it. It's just that you also had another company at the same time.
Yeah, so in Yieldify, I became a board member as well. So I wasn't full-time in the job. So fortunately I had some space as well. So I think my case is probably quite unique in that I wasn't full-time in a job and I had an exit, which was all planned, by the way, which I can explain.
Please.
But yeah, but that whole process that one goes through whilst selling their company, I guess I was doing it whilst running a company and then eventually out. So I did have that space, which was quite fortunate.
So you mentioned you actually planned it to be like that.
Hey, you want to go
Can
for that?
you elaborate?
Yeah, so one of my difficult things I can't do is I don't think I can work for another corporate again. I just can't. It's like my worst personal nightmare. And I knew the moment Yieldify was about to sell, and there's 2 phases. There's one moment we were actually going to sell, and we didn't come to alignment. It didn't work out, and then we sold it the second time. And during that whole process, I reflected, and I was so worried about working for a corporate for 1, 2, 3 years. It was just it was just something that I couldn't personally put myself through. Yeah. I really feel that the way someone works best is if they're free. They're given that level of creativity, and I'm worried, and I know that in a corporate that may not be possible. Yeah. So through some ways that I aligned with the board, basically I transitioned to be a board member, and then which meant that if a sale took place, I wouldn't be part of that. And I don't see myself running a company again. So therefore, there's no risk of me being acquired.
Yeah, I remember we talked about this, how you don't think you are the right CEO material.
Yeah.
You're much better at the earliest, more creative stage.
Yeah, I think
When did you discover that, and like how did you get that clarity?
Yeah, I feel I'm a good CEO, but I don't think I'm a great CEO. And what I mean by that is I think I'm good when there's like less than 100, 200 people. Like I can deal with that. But once it gets past that, what I find is that it's just, it's a lot of people management. It's a lot of just operational management, holding accountability to, tens or hundreds of people. I really miss the creative aspect and the bit of truly connecting with a small team. I always say like Blissgrowth, which is, I'm forwarding a little bit, but in the venture studio, it's only a small team. It's only like 10, 12 of us. And it's like a band. We all play together, we work together. And I really like that. Once it gets too big, you lose that touch. So for me, I don't feel that's where I do my best work. Now, I was very fortunate in Yieldify, my first company. Our chairman was an extremely strong operator, and I learned a lot from him. And he, scaled out lots of companies. He's IPO'd companies. So I learned a lot. So I saw what the optimal execution operator looks like in me. And I learned a lot from him. And I'm very grateful for it. But I don't think that's probably what I should be doing in this lifetime. Like I really enjoy the start. I enjoy the incubation of a company. I enjoy the ideation and finding the founders to work with me. So the venture studio I run, I really love that. That's where I feel I'm supposed to be.
Let's talk about that. Because so many of our common friends who exited companies are dreaming about or trying to build venture studios.
Yeah.
I'd love you to talk about pros and cons of that. Like if I asked you, shall I do it?
Yeah. It's an interesting conversation. I definitely have had a lot of people come to me and quiz me and put a torch in my face and say, what's really going on? And I feel what people don't realize is that I've always wanted a venture studio. Even before Yieldify, I was running multiple companies. So in the back of our minds, my brother and me, who I do the venture studio with, and there's a team of us, we both looked at each other and we knew at some moment we were going to build a venture studio. We don't know when, but we knew it. So if you think about it, all through those, this was in 2013, and we'd been building companies probably from like 2011. So you could probably see for the last 12 years it's been in us. And during those times, I officially probably started the venture studio when I started Reach Desk. That was the first company technically. But what happened was the company started growing so quick that it actually required me to jump in and help more. But I had always been doing the research. It was something I've always wanted to do. So I think I was meant to do it. This is what I feel. Now, on the outside, it looks exciting. There's, you're running multiple companies. Each venture studio is also very unique. We can talk about my one probably in a bit more later, but each venture studio is different because you might build like 3 companies a year all the way to 10 or 20 a year. And there's this line of like, is a venture studio as an accelerator, right? Like venture studio in my mind is actually helping on day 0 with the ideation and helping with the founders. Now, when people come to me with the conversation, should I do it? I ask them questions about what they're into. And because you've really got to be okay building multiple companies and be hands-on. It's super time intensive to the point where, I think I've mentioned to you before where like if I had a family with lots of kids, I don't know if I'd do a venture studio because it is so much work and time. So I think that's a big question. Like, are you prepared to put in the time? Do you like being hands-on in companies? That's obviously exciting because I think a lot of people have done some angel investing or have done like venture tickets, let's say, but you realize you don't get as hands-on, whereas in a venture studio you do. However, once the company hits a certain scale and you get Series A investors, you're not really that hands-on anymore. You're just, again, someone on the cap table at times. Yes, the founder will call me up when he's got a problem, but that touch and that involvement does go down. So then that's another interesting aspect to work through. It's very capital intensive. People don't know this, but my brother and me and the team, like we're investing like, over $1 million each, like just to keep the thing running at the same time, sometimes investing, because the first capital comes from us. So, and you're taking no salary, right? So the question is, it does take millions to run and you're going to be making no salary. So you're waiting for the payout. So are you prepared to do that? And some people probably can. but it is a financial constraint unless you raise a big fund on the back of a venture studio, which you can, but then you're going to lose that freedom, and you're then going to have a lot of like structure and milestones, and it gets very intense, and which will then lose all that freedom that you desired. So it's once you work through these, and then you also need to have a focus. Like, so for us, we focus only on B2B enterprise software. Some people might say, hey, that's a bit boring. I want to do lots of things. And that's okay, but then you're never going to be strong in one area. So that's another factor, is like, are you okay with just staying down one like single lane? So that's another data point. And then I think another big part is the team. At the start, as I mentioned, the Blissgrowth is like a band, and like each person's got a different area of strength. Like my brother is obsessed about product. We've got another guy on our team who's obsessed about engineering. Someone's obsessed about go-to-market. So, and that obsession needs to be there with that one person, because they need to own it. And at the same time, you all need to be able to work as a group or a band, right? And so therefore, you need to have strong people in all these parts. So I do think you need a good number of good co-founders at the start for it to work, because there is so much to get done. That if someone's listened to that and said, that sounds super exciting and none of them I'm afraid of, then I think there might be something there to check.
Yeah, but it's interesting that lots of people are considering that option because they actually don't want to work as hard as they did in the first company.
Yeah.
So they think that it will be easier.
Yeah.
But it's not your experience, is
Oh,
it?
no. It's look, the beautiful part is I have multiple companies that I can work with, right? And I pick the founders, and it aligns. So that is one of my like joys of life, to work with these founders. But in the end, it's you are sacrificing other parts. I think people don't see those layers. When I spoke to other people that ran venture studios, they would look at me and go, "Are you sure? Are you crazy?" Like, so they would always say that to me, and I can see why now, because it is so many aspects you're juggling. Now, I'm still early in my journey, I'd say. I feel now I'm starting to get my groove into it, but it's definitely been a lot of work, because you have to put lots of processes in place. You want to make sure you are genuinely giving value to these portfolio companies who are my customers technically. But yeah, now I'm in a great place, but it's definitely been a lot of work.
Are you physically in the same space? With at least some of
them? So a couple of days a week, yes.
Okay.
A couple of days a week, yes.
Otherwise, they have their own.
Yes.
Locations.
Fortunately, I've worked with a lot of them before, so we know how we all work. So that's helped. But yeah, we find we get a lot of work done just remote.
So how would you compare your venture studio model, your one, to an accelerator, and also to very hands-on angel investing?
Yeah.
How is it different? So
with us, we work with the founders on the ideation process. So generally, they don't have an idea, and they're usually just one co-founder potentially, and therefore we're playing as the second co-founder, and they're really looking for someone that they can lean on and at the same time enjoy working with. So then that's where we come in. So in summary, like we help with the ideation. We believe we're the right partner. On our website, it's an exceptional partner. But what I mean by that is we're builders as well, and we don't take any preferences or anything like that. All of our terms are very fair. They're all like aligned with the founder, which is also quite unique. And we've got all the playbooks and systems to help them. So if that's what they want, that's the venture studio model. That's our one. But I think a lot of the venture studios have got some form of similarities around those aspects. Now, an accelerator is a bit different. They've sometimes got an idea, and the level of support that they're going to get is much less. It's for, if you may have an idea, you may be a first-time founder, you have an idea, an accelerator is a great place, right? To go join one of the leading accelerators is probably the right path. We're focused only on exited or second-time founders. The accelerators will probably accommodate for both. And Accelerators is more about being part of a community, having 100, 200 startups in a batch, and then you go from there. And I've got various friends running those, and I think it's a great model as well for that type of founder. And then obviously angel investing is, really at this point they've got an idea and they've probably got some form of market fit, hopefully, and you're investing, but you're writing a small ticket, owning probably less than 1% of the company and hoping that it becomes successful. Now I've done 40 of those. For me, I didn't feel that I was enough. Like, you're not getting enough. It's not enough hands-on for me. Like, I want to be a bit more involved, and at the same time, it's just betting on a big portfolio. You don't know which one's going to do good. Whereas in the venture studio, I've got a bit more say, and I know the idea a lot better. So they're all different. So you have to.
How many do you have? How many companies do you have in your venture studio?
Excluding Yieldify, we have 7 at the moment.
So you have 40 you angel invested in.
Yeah.
And there you're quite passive? Or
Yeah,
you're
passive.
involved?
I've
You're
paused
completely
that now because it's so capital intensive
Yeah.
with Blissgrowth.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought 47 would be
Yeah,
crazy.
exactly. So, but when those, I'm very passive. Obviously, some of the founders reach out and they want help, and I'll try to help as I can. But I pretty much tell them when I invest, say, look, you're not going to get much of my time because it's elsewhere. But obviously, I want them to do the best. But I think what I've realized is that I really enjoy helping the founders, probably like you and other people, and then therefore, so I started writing bigger tickets on Angel to try to see if that would make me more connected, but still it didn't. Because at the end of the day, once you get a big VC on or a big investor, they normally hold the relationship. And you don't really, I felt, sometimes I give my advice, but it doesn't, it's sometimes not listened, so it's okay.
So if we go back to that moment when you were standing in that beautiful Manhattan apartment thinking, what's my purpose? And I know for a fact that you're in a very good place today, and you have a sense of purpose, and you do find your life fulfilling. If we just look at that journey, what do you think really moved the needle for you? Coming from no purpose and feeling empty to now being purpose-driven and fulfilled?
Yeah, I think it's definitely got different phases, that journey. And what you always find is that when you look back a year or 2 years, wherever you are, you thought you figured stuff out, but then you look back and go, you didn't. So every time, even what I say today, exactly. So I feel like the biggest lesson is still the biggest lesson for me today is just trying to connect more within myself. So I say my heart or my intuition, and that, I think in life, as we all know, we're always leading with our mind, and you have to lead more with the heart and listen to that heart, listen to that voice. And in that moment when I was in the Manhattan flat, I feel I was just going 100 miles per hour, and I was trying to control things, and I was trying to go from A to B, and that was not healthy because I wasn't checking in on my heart and seeing what that wanted. So I then had to try to, because I say like the heart is all, like I say, like our body's like a vessel and we're moving in life, and like the heart is like the electricity, or this intuition is the electricity. That's actually what you're supposed to be. You're already connected to it, but you're not, because your mind is now taken over. So the goal was to try to connect that much more stronger, to remove the clouds and connect to that heart. And to do that, I had to try out lots of different things because it was so foggy, because my mind was so much in control, and therefore I did a lot of reading, so I had to go do a lot of discovery and read various bits of spirituality, philosophy, religion even helped in certain parts. I'm not religious, but they were giving some signposts to try to heal and connect me more towards that. So that was a big part, and I started doing a lot of yoga, meditation. If you'd asked me would I get into yoga at that time, I would have probably and if you'd asked me 15 years ago, I would have said no, but that actually worked for me. In fact, what I found is probably doing the uncomfortable things is probably where the answer is. So if you walk into that fear, so for me, I always thought yoga is not for me, but actually when I tried it, it was really hard at the start. It was brutal. I went on some extensive courses where, honestly, I was in so much pain where I'd go and I'd tell people, I say, look, I've just done one day of this course. I can't do it anymore. This is one of the hardest things. But actually, I stayed with it. And I'd say that played quite a big part. And so I've been practicing yoga pretty much nearly every day for the last 7 years.
And that made the biggest
I'd
difference.
say that played
Yeah.
for me. I think each individual will
Yeah.
find what their right way is to connect, and really just quietening that mind. So things like walking always help, but actually just walking in like nature and with no music, and because you have to try to. What people sometimes think is that me being by myself, even there's noise, is enough, but actually you have to try to be fully with oneself. So I tried out lots of things. Obviously, I do a lot of meditation, breath work. I went on loads of courses, retreats to learn that. So I tried out so many different ways to connect. And it was actually probably a mix of all of them that helped me. But then slowly, what then happened was I started connecting more within, and then that started giving me the answers to how I should be approaching life and making certain decisions, and things like just slowing down became easier. Still hard though, if you've got a venture-backed company and you've got a board and your whole team's pushing and they've got goals, and like you still got that voice coming, but I try to just quieten it and just go from
because
within.
now you have the skill, now you have the muscle
Yes.
to do that.
Yeah, it's nearly my default.
To protect your mind from
Yeah.
the noise.
Yes, exactly. So I feel, and every morning I'll spend like an hour, 2 hours just connecting to it, so that when I'm approaching the day, hopefully I'm coming more from that place. And it's just a constant, it's like another workout.
So for you, it's about experiencing this emptiness in the best sense of the word, and being connected to yourself.
Yes.
Through that experience of removing the noise.
Yes, exactly. And
so it's less is more, basically.
Yeah, less is more.
An idea.
And just trusting within. So, which means you have to sometimes slow down, which is sometimes the opposite to a startup. But, as you're running a company, as people know, you still need to go fast. You still need to execute fast, but you've got moments of stillness or moments of times when you are connected back in to then to reflect on, okay, wow, I lost I went for it just then, but it's okay. I consciously did that.
Yeah.
And it's something I'm trying to become better at more and more. Like I'm starting to slowly be better, but obviously, it's still stuff that I'm working on.
It's a process.
Yeah, it's a process.
So in terms of any intellectual work, like changing your mindset, seeing things from a different angle, did you do any of that?
Yeah, obviously a lot of reading, started changing, did a lot of rewiring for myself, because there was definitely a lot of beliefs that I had that, I really believe in that neuroplasticity where you're, I know we all play with ChatGPT now, but I actually think we as humans are also a robot, and there's some ChatGPT in us, and you're sending prompts to ourselves. So I don't see much difference. And so there's certain wirings or beliefs that we have that need to be readjusted. So I definitely had to do a lot of that, and I continue to do that. And
give me some examples of things that changed for you and actually made a difference in your life. Again, from that place where you were empty and no purpose to today. Like, what mindset shifts made a difference?
I'd say there's a few that come to mind, but I feel like when I'm in situations and that voice intuition is speaking, and it's guiding me, I will, and if it does prompt or feel something, in that situation, I do pause longer, or I may pause a decision, or I might just follow what it said. So before, let's say I'm meeting someone, or let's say there's a decision to be made, or something doesn't feel right, I don't feel I was trusting that voice enough. So by me slowing down now, that voice does have first say rather than the mind.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's been quite a big adjustment.
So you make a conscious decision
Yes.
to listen to that voice and slow down,
Yes.
to give yourself that experience of reconnecting with yourself.
Yeah, with myself, and just with that moment, and just to listen in what it's saying, because sometimes it's trying to tell you something. The other thing I'd say is probably around fear. Like before, whenever I felt vulnerable, I felt I was in a place where I felt uncomfortable, I would try to avoid it, or I would try to ignore it and then pretend to come back to it later, but I never do. Whereas now I actually enjoy coming back to those moments, and to either feel, if I can feel it in the moment, I will, but sometimes it's quite hard. But I enjoy now those moments, because usually that's where the lesson is. So for example, let's say that I am supposed to, it could be as simple as like meeting someone where I'm like a bit scared to for some reason, because they might tell me something that might challenge me. Like this is what happened before, or something that, or you know, just someone that I was meant to go see a few years ago, but I haven't. But then it's coming back, and I think we all have had that moment where like, hey, go see this person. But you're like, no, I don't, not now. But when that moment comes now, I will, and if it's coming from the heart, I will just go do it. So I'll take action. So I think that's been, again, and that comes back from listening.
You know, for me, it's so exciting, because there was a point when I also trained myself to react to fears very differently, because I realized it's when we overcome our fear that we get this powerful release of energy, which actually must be there with the purpose to help us go where we are scared to go.
Exactly.
So I actually trained myself to get very excited when I'm scared, and now it's working.
Yeah.
So I love hearing that you also changed your relationship with fear.
Yeah, it's been it's very freeing, right? Because I think I think we all feel vulnerable, and we don't want to sometimes share that side of ourselves. And so I actually have changed the rewiring so that I get excited when that happens. Obviously, in the moment, I'm a bit scared, but
you know, there is, Carl Jung, the psychologist, the Austrian psychologist, he actually has this idea that when we intentionally overcome an insecurity, then we release energy. It's just how things work in our psychology. And I remember reading it for the first time when I was a teenager. And that's when I first discovered it, because teenagers are so full of insecurities. And I actually did it for a while, like using his ideas. But then, of course, life got in the way, and I forgot all about it. And it was only after I sold the business and had space like you, when I came back to that idea. And now I think it's one of the most life-changing things you can experience.
Yeah.
Change in your relationship with fear.
Yeah, no, it's been, I think, what Carl Jung said, and it's actually, I'd say one of the things that makes me most happiest in life is that evolving of myself, and obviously watching others evolve, but like that's a big part of my happiness. And I didn't realize that fear can actually make me happy. So it is actually all connected. Well, for me anyway. And I think the more times you go through that process of challenging the fears, it does actually become easier. It's a bit like a muscle. Yeah,
because so many founders think, oh, it's about perseverance, and perseverance is very important. But it's very powerful if instead of perseverance, you think about the reward that you will get on the other side, and you get excited about it. Then suddenly you don't need to persevere. You get pulled to that idea that there is something amazingly pleasant on the other side.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so that's great. Anything else that you feel helped you move from like the whole idea of finding purpose? It's quite hard, right? You said we all pause, we all research, reflect, and then we find it. But my observation is that so many of us don't find it for a decade or more, or ever. Do you share that observation? Because you know so many exited founders. Obviously, you work with them in your fund. You run a whole organization for Europe for exited founders. So you see lots of other people. Like, what's your observation in terms of how successful other people are in finding their purpose post-exit?
Yeah, I feel once you, I guess I've been fortunate. I've probably now met hundreds of exited founders, and each one has got their own journey. And I feel that the ones that probably, I believe, have done the work is they pause for longer. right? And they spend more time on that pausing and that recalibration of what is their purpose. And they just sit with the fire, I like to call it, because it's not easy, because you're reflecting back and you acknowledge that stuff that you've probably done wasn't done consciously, because you're moving so fast and you're just not self-aware. And to then also decode what is my life purpose is a very complex puzzle. It's probably one of the hardest puzzles one has to solve, especially when they're doing it the first time after they've had an exited company. So, and that puzzle is very complex. It's simple but complex, and it's very unique to them. And I think what I find is that people will go read books and go on the internet and try to figure out what their purpose is. And however it's been written for that person, I feel like each person's purpose is specific to them, and they have to spend time trying to decode it. And plus there's layers. So I think for me, when I meet these founders, I can see who's probably done more work by just how they answer the question. Are they conscious? Are they in the moment? So you can normally sense it.
Yeah.
And for me, I guess I'm one of those people that likes to sit in the fire. I've always done it. I think since the age of like 22, 23, I was one of those crazy people that got into Tony Robbins quite early on. And then so I'd sit on a Sunday and just sit there thinking about my purpose and what my values are. So I've been that person. So I like that work.
Do you think your Indian heritage has something to do with it?
I feel maybe.
Because that's my observation, that Indians are dealing much better with existential issues.
Interesting. So I was, I guess, born as a Hindu, and my parents are both Indian. They weren't religious. My grandma was, and she would read like scriptures, but I was aware of it, but I didn't really. I wasn't really following the religion. I knew aspects. I celebrate certain days. I knew parts, but I didn't actually study the scriptures. I actually studied the Indian scriptures as well as other scriptures, like in Christianity. Studied Kabbalah. I've studied quite a few, and it was only at that point when I was trying to figure out what is my purpose and what's life about. That's when I genuinely was all in, and I wanted to figure it out, and I started reading it. I feel that with Hinduism, it's around spirituality. That's at its core. So it does allow you to be a free thinker, which has helped. But again, I'm not that into that religion side. But I feel, I don't know if maybe, I don't know. I'm trying to work out, did Hinduism or did my upbringing, I don't know.
I have lots of Indian friends and lots of Indian friends who sold companies, and I've been fascinated by this observation that the Indians are doing better, even people who are not religious themselves. And my theory is that it's because so many of us in the West have this fear of spirituality and this idea that spirituality is this weird mysticism. And, like, there is skepticism towards spirituality, while many Indian people in my observation just don't have that skepticism. So even if you're not religious, you may be open enough to go and take religions seriously, and not just necessarily your family's religion, but as you said, Kabbalah and whatever else you read.
Yeah,
I think skepticism is a huge problem.
And so was I. So I was the.
So you've overcome.
Yeah, I've
overcome
it. Yeah, definitely. I didn't really believe in spirituality or just trusting that there's a higher power, or like that wasn't really me. I think. For me, I had to go through my own journey. Yeah. But for me, it's come through feelings, as in me practicing yoga, me doing meditation, me doing breath work. I think what I found is when I'm in those moments of stillness, I feel something within me. I can feel something beyond me. And that's when things started coming true for me. And I think each person just needs to go on their own journey. And it's, to be honest, like, you know, I've got loads of friends who are atheists. I've got lots of friends who are totally against spirituality. But as long as they feel there's something that really makes them happy in the end, or like takes them back to like a loving place, because that's really what it is. As long as they've got love in them, that's okay. Spirituality to me helped me to connect me to that kind, loving state, because I think that's what we all hopefully thrive to get to eventually. And spirituality is a connection point to that.
Because all religions actually have the same message, and the
for
message
sure.
is grow out of your selfishness,
Yes.
and become bigger, become less selfish.
Yes.
And for me, for example, I only truly understood what purpose is when I understood this message. Because purpose is not about doing what we love. Purpose is actually about committing to contribute at our very best and from the right place, which is love or duty. Right? And if we don't have this intent, if we are not ready for that, we can't have purpose. We can have a job. We can have an occupation. We can be busy. But we can't have the sense of purpose, because having a sense of purpose is actually that reward we get for contributing to the world.
Totally.
And even though I agree with you that our paths are very individual, I think the blocks on our paths are actually very typical. And one of them is that spiritual skepticism and also the lack of understanding of what purpose is. We feel intuitively we want to find purpose, but we can't even define it. You know, I ask people on this podcast very often, like, what is purpose for you? And it's incredible that people actually don't know. They say, I am looking for purpose, but I have no idea what it is.
I think it's interesting you say that. I think a lot of the times, because there's just so much in their mind and they've got such a logical mind, they may be very gifted intellectually, or they've been praised as their identity of being very smart, and they feel that anything, because it's like things like spirituality go beyond the mind, and you can't, it's not something you can totally logically process. It's something that you feel or you believe, right? And that's not logical. So I feel for, you know, successful entrepreneurs or just any entrepreneur, because they're so convinced that they're the ones in charge and they're the ones that go from A to B. When I ask certain founders, I go, okay, like, what determines your success? They go, it's me. And whereas I'm like, but there's a lot of things outside of your control as well. But they're just focused on them being in control.
But that's this selfishness, right? That's this me, and not being able to see that we are part of something much bigger. We have to be able. We have to experience that. Like when you meditate, you essentially experience that being part of something bigger.
Yeah, definitely. I think at the right time, I feel people will find that place, and I think as you go more in that journey, you start realizing how incredible everything really is, and you start opening.
Well, maybe when AI can do more intellectual work for us, we can do more spiritual work.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
For ourselves. More
when we get to that ASI zone, the super intelligence.
When we can delegate all the intellectual work.
Yeah, I'm scared because I think it is I don't think we're far away, and I feel once a few hundred or a few thousand people start putting like chips in their head, it's clear that you have to put it in to just fit in, right?
But you see, you can't. If you're scared, you should be excited about it. Right?
That's true. That's true.
We flip that. Let's get excited about it. Let's maybe think that.
That's the first I'm excited about that. But you're right.
Let AI have that mental noise. Let's them worry about it, and we can be in this spiritual bliss state. How wonderful!
That's a good way. It's a good way. You already passed the other side on the ASI. I haven't just yet, but it's okay. I'll get there.
Anyway, so let's go back to more practical questions. So I know that you've tried many things since your definition of exit, and one of them was actually doing a podcast. And your podcast originally was called The Happy Millionaire. Then you renamed it into Joyful Entrepreneur. And for me, it was the most exciting thing ever, because I thought, oh my God, something very important, very deep changed in Jay's perception of what he's given to the world. And I'd love you to tell me why you renamed your podcast.
So, sure. So what people don't know is actually there was a name before Happy Millionaire, which was actually the name I wanted. It was actually called The Conscious Entrepreneur, which was, the premise around the podcast was to try to give insights to other entrepreneurs on how to be more joyful along that entrepreneurship journey, because it's not the first time you do it. And that was what the focus was, and I did it with one of my friends called Rupi, and he's a good friend of mine. So it was this dialogue that we would have as a conversational, but would bring on guests as well. And we basically had a production team. So I wanted to make sure the podcast was done the right way. So I put together this production team, and we used them as well. And one of the things they said is that your name's not catchy enough. Like, no one's going to get it. Like, because being conscious wasn't that cool 3-4 years ago, whereas now it's like everyone's saying be kind, be loving. But it wasn't. It was quite. We were a bit ahead of our time, and they said, look, you can't call it that. We've been doing some Googling, and we think you should call it Happy Millionaire because it's somewhat the same thing, and it will get more eyeballs. So I naively...
Sounds like a very intellectual decision, right?
Exactly.
Talking about heart versus mind.
Totally. And then I think at that moment we just said, I just wanted to get the podcast going.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, let's just go with it. Like, we can always change it later. And then the podcast became... it was like an overnight success. It got very popular very quickly. We're like in the top 10 in the charts, and I was like, okay, cool. I guess it's called Happy Millionaire now. And it was a new thing for me. I don't know, it was going into the fear. I didn't want to do a podcast, but then I didn't. And then my friend actually just pushed me and said, look, we're going to do it. And he's like got one of the top like podcasts in the world. So I was like, okay, I might as well just, if I'm going to do it, I'll do it with my friend. And through that journey, as we were doing it more and more, I realized that we weren't probably talking about some of the topics that were where I wanted to lead the podcast. And at the same time, I realized how much work it needs. I think people underestimate how much work you're probably putting behind the scenes. And for me, whilst running my venture studio, it was a lot of work. So all of these things led me to pause the podcast. And during that pause as well, I renamed it to Joyful Entrepreneur, because I said, okay, if I'm going to do it again, I want to make sure it's done with that as its foundation, as the name. I did actually start recording a few episodes with some friends, but then in the end, I couldn't go around. I don't think I wanted to proceed just now. Some of my great friends were very kind and they recorded some episodes, but I just didn't feel it was the right time.
But what did you get out of that experience? Even if you never go back to your podcast, which you may or may not do, what do you feel you got out of it?
Yeah, I think the podcast definitely allowed me to express myself much better. I feel communication is still probably one of the most beautiful skills that we as a human can have. So definitely helped me on that. It allowed me to dive deep into certain topics that were interesting, because it's all good. Like, all of us can be one of those keyboard warriors and pretend we know lots about different topics. But when you're on a camera and you're having to talk about it, it has to be very concise. And so it definitely helped on that side. It definitely opened up doors, probably too many doors at some point, as in there was just a lot of people that wanted to then speak. And for me, timing wasn't right. I don't think I wanted that attention. But it definitely did open up doors. And I guess I was a better listener through all that as well, because you learn how to truly listen. So definitely improved on that side. So I'd say there was more pros than negatives overall, but timing wasn't right for me. And it was a tough to say pause, but I feel it was the right decision.
So the reason I'm asking is because I see lots of people in the post-exit community trying to find their voice through some medium. For some people, it's a podcast. Others write on LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever. I personally think it's amazing because it gives people some kind of structure and discipline around that difficult process of crystallize in our thoughts and experiences. So I like encouraging people to do that. So I would take a positive spin on your experience, even though you decided to stop.
Yeah.
It was good for you.
Yeah.
A good experience.
Yeah. Otherwise, people can just be guests on like podcasts like yourself. I think there's a lot of opportunity on that side. So they don't have to host their own podcasts. We've chatted about it before as well, just talking on the camera and sharing your experiences. There's blogging. There's so many other ways to share.
But it's important because many people feel lonely, and in a way, even if you don't yet have deep connections with other exited founders, because that takes years. I think if you are even talking through your ideas and expressing your deep thoughts and making this existential crisis a bit more open, it helps.
Definitely.
Because those who are depressed usually are also the ones who are not talking about what's happening.
Definitely. I think your podcast is definitely encouraging that conversation of that post-exit. And that's why I think you're doing an incredible job. And you're just so focused on that side. So people are getting to see lots of different experiences. But I think one of the other great things is obviously the PF community, which we're both part of. I know Barak and Shlomo, they maybe listen to this, but they've obviously done a great job, and it's an honor to help the entrepreneurs in Europe now and try to create events and communities.
I think that community really changed so much for the better, because I've been in the space for 13 years, and I definitely see a huge shift since the community started, because they normalized the conversation. The biggest problem I had before was that people would not talk about any kind of issues after a successful exit, because they would say, oh, the world will just hate me for complaining or even raising an issue because I'm supposed to be so happy and so wealthy, right? But I think the PEF normalized it. I'm trying to do it with this podcast as well, because so many people tell me, oh, I can't talk about it. And then I can tell them, listen, all these people came to the podcast, they talked, and I never get negative, nasty feedback, because I think people who are not interested, they will not even come and listen to a podcast like this. But those who are interested, maybe founders who are about to sell, they will be very respectful to these issues. They would be genuinely interested, or other exited founders would be able to relate.
Definitely.
Because my ultimate dream is that the society generally accepts the fact that even when we are very successful in a traditional definition, like financially successful, it doesn't mean that we are happy, because once the society understands that, I hope other people will stop chasing money as fanatically.
Yeah.
Right? There may be all these interesting implications to that.
Well, I think it boils down to the question of like, what do you define as success or purpose, right? And I feel the great thing is on this podcast, people are articulating their new belief of what.
Let's talk about you though.
Okay.
I want to
What's my new belief?
How your definition of success changed over time. Like what it used to be, what is it now, and why?
Yeah, I think, the honest truth was, I think before it was probably some of the material aspects, right? Like chasing the success of a company, the financials, how other people would view me. I think that was, when I was younger, it probably comes back to my childhood. Like my parents were both refugees that came to this country with nothing. And so it's probably parts of that. And then through the wiring and rechanging, obviously that has now changed. And for me, I have like 5 areas which try to encompass like my whole life, right? So my one is like connecting with my heart, or connecting with the light. So that's like my first part of my purpose. So that's me being still, having a calm mind, just being relaxed. So like that is what is my number one, and that needs to happen. Then second one is obviously my health. So it's like want to make sure I have a fit, healthy body. So that means going to the gym, doing my walks, eating healthy. So that is something that is my purpose, but also makes me happy. So before I dive into the others, it's just, I think when I say purpose, it's just like what makes me happy. And I've had a lot of retrospective and just try to point on what these are. And then the third one is like being loving. So this is like my relationships. This is relationships with my partner, to my friends, family, to my founders, to my colleagues. So this is like, it's just me making sure I'm in a kind, loving place with those. So that's really important. The fourth one is, okay, now I've gone blank now. So you might have to edit this.
That's
Okay.
all right.
What was the fourth one? Now I've gone a bit blank. The fourth one is around play. So whatever I do has to be, I need to enjoy it. So it has to be a play. So I guess I'm very fortunate now after the exit where I can decide what I enjoy doing. So that fourth one is play. So that means like my work. I do the work that I enjoy. And I focus on that. You know, I'm spending time going on holidays, trips with all my loved ones. That's what I consider play. So I try to make my calendar to be as much around playing and being in that flow state, people like to call it, but just trying to play as much. So I try to work out what is play, and I reflect. And the fifth one is about evolving, and that's me learning and growing. And you know what we talked about, like reflecting, okay, what am I scared of? Where do I need to do the work? And I really enjoy that piece, and that's obviously me doing my reading, me meeting interesting people, but I also track that as well. So those are like my 5 lanes, and that is what currently makes me happy. And I usually know if I'm feeling a bit off, and I ask myself, okay, am I connecting to my heart? Is my body, am I in a fit, healthy spot? Am I got some loving relationships? Am I learning or growing? And am I playing? If normally one is off, so that's my quick check. And I try to live my life around those. If you had spoken to me about a year ago, it may have been a bit different. But generally, like it's starting to be a bit more consistent. So that's how I define like my purpose, which makes me like what makes me happy. If those 5 things are in place, there'll be times when one is off, maybe 2s are off, but the more they're okay, then I will be happy.
So your venture studio, how does it fit into those 5?
Yeah, so what people don't know is the name of our venture studio actually came when I was connected to my heart. So it's called Blissgrowth. And the reasoning behind it is that I wanted to create fast-growing companies. That's something I enjoy. For me, that's play, when they're just growing to their full potential. But I wanted to do it in a very centered place where it'd be joyful. And then suddenly, I remember I was just sitting there on the sofa or a chair like this, and this 2 words just came out, Blissgrowth. It just came from within. And I was like, that sounds really good. And then
Beautiful.
Then I went on to on GoDaddy. GoDaddy's not sponsoring this, but yeah, so I typed it in and the domain was available. And I was like, oh wow.
That's meant to be.
Yeah, it's meant to be. And then, so that came from that connected place. And I've created a life where, you know, I'm not working 24/7. Yes, I'm working hard, but you know, I can spend time on my body, making sure it's fit and healthy. And in terms of the being loving, like I'm deciding which founders we work with, and my team as well. So I've made sure that the environment is an environment that I'm excited about. So that one's ticked. And then playing, I'm doing the work I love, which is starting companies from 0 to 1. Like it is truly play for me. I love it. This is I remember someone said this, but the way to determine if you're doing the right company or the right work is if someone dangled, this is crazy, but someone dangled like $1 billion in front of your face and said, I'm going to take your company away from you right now, and you can never ever do anything like it ever again, what will your answer be? And I'm being honest, if someone did that to me with Blissgrowth and said, hey, you're never allowed to do a venture studio ever again, and I'm taking it away from you, you're going to have to figure something else out, like I wouldn't sell.
Yeah.
Like like no matter what you give to me.
I actually believe you, because you've been tested by this. Like you had this experience of getting money in exchange of losing your business.
Yeah.
So I believe that you actually mean it.
So that is and I just love what I do. So it is proper play. And then the learning and evolving, there's just on a venture studio, the lessons are endless. Like you're meeting so many different personalities, you're having to build like a platform, you're meeting so many investors to family offices, which are all unique and different. So there's just an endless number of lessons to learn. So
you've just offered us such a beautiful framework
yeah,
for somebody to consider.
it's a framework that works for me. I don't, I want to, but it might work.
That's all we need. What
Yeah,
worked
yeah.
for you, because that's relevant. That's not just abstract thinking. It's your experience of going from a bad place to a good place.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that whenever I do that exercise, it just, I don't know, I always just feel the dopamine. I feel good because it feels right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so how do you think about this venture studio? It sounds like it's something that you're committing to long term. There is a reason I'm asking. There is this popular belief out there that we should build companies with the idea to sell and plan for the exit from the beginning. And I know you've given it quite a lot of thought, and I would love you to share this whole idea of, should we build to exit or should we build for other reasons? Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, I feel it's an interesting topic, and for me, I really believe in life, and it goes back to my 5 principles, but even you'll see it across Blissgrowth, is that everyone has to reach their full potential. For me, that is why we're here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have to push it to reach that other side. And I start these companies off with the founder with the premise that they are taking it all the way, whatever that means to them. Some founders we'll meet, they want to exit soon, some want to exit later. We generally do not. We generally like to go all the way. Now, as an investment thesis though, and like me creating these businesses, sometimes we will sell at later stages, like we'll sell equity. Now, but the founder, we want them to be committed to go all the way, whatever that looks like. And ideally that is, getting to a very big scale or just keep on running it endlessly. In the UK and in Europe, you probably get less. There's definitely a lot of founders who want to go more bootstrapped now and want to, build to sell. I don't really enjoy working with those founders as much, because I know they're not thinking about their full potential. They're thinking about the exit. So for Blissgrowth, we try to build companies that will go as far as they can. Now, some will sell and some will reach. But the truth is, with software companies, most likely you can build a company to last and go all the way. But it's very likely that an acquisition will take place. It just is. It's just likely. And not all companies are going to IPO. You'll know, the market will tell you. Obviously, you build it so that you can be, you can go all the way, and you may go, do an IPO or don't even an IPO, but you're going as far as you can. And it might be hundreds and hundreds of millions of revenue, but data shows that most likely you are going to be acquired if it's a good business. So, we go in the purpose of going all the way, but I trust the process.
But what about you? Are you committed to Blissgrowth all the way?
Yeah, there is nothing else I want to do.
You're not planning for an exit for yourself?
No. My companies would exit. I don't think I would ever, maybe someone wants to acquire Blissgrowth, but I don't, I wouldn't, as I said, even if they offered me whatever money, I wouldn't do it. It's because it's literally, you're taking away my PlayStation, my play, right? That's not going to happen. So
you only invest in repeat founders, and there are obvious explanations for it. They have the business, they have the experience, they've proved their ability to create value and take a company all the way to an exit. Are there any other reasons that may not be as obvious why you prefer to work with these people?
I think for me, I want to focus on helping them solve the hard things. If it's a first-time founder, you're going to have to most likely guide them through the hoops, which are things like hiring your first salesperson, hiring your first finance person. Hey, I've got a term sheet. There's some preferences. What does that mean? And and for me, I don't feel I'm being challenged or I'm going to enjoy that part as much. So, and because I've now built multiple companies, I feel like they relate to me and I relate to them. There is just a connection. Yeah. And as I've been meeting more, because before I did invest in first-time founders, I did work with them, and then I also did repeat or experienced founders, and I just enjoyed, like through tests, that I wanted to just dedicate my life to work with them and hopefully help them reach their full potential. So, and I used to hold loads of community events. Like even before I was running PF, I used to hold community events for exited founders in London, and it was just something I really, really enjoyed. And exactly like you, I love understanding the psychology post-exit.
Yeah.
I love having the conversations. So yeah, I was just fascinated, and now to get to work with them is just...
You know, when I was very fresh out of my first exit, I thought I had this genius idea that I'm going to angel invest, but I'll only angel invest in repeat founders. And my thinking wasn't nearly as deep as yours. I simply thought, oh, the likelihood of success is high there. And at that time, I had no idea about how the whole post-exit journey actually plays out. Most of my investments didn't go well. And part of the reason is that I didn't do my due diligence properly or whatever. I was investing for wrong reasons. I was really just trying to become somebody again, you know, to solve my identity crisis. But another reason they failed, which I only started understanding much later, is that when you invest in second-time founders, there are very unique risks that come with them that you actually don't have with first-time founders. And those have to do, for example, with things like they rush into this second business before they've done the work we talked about before, just sitting with themselves, figuring out what it is they actually want. And then people tend to run out of the motivation, and they no longer have that resilience to push through problems because the motivation is not there. Things like that. And for a while, I actually stopped doing it, and I went to the opposite extreme. And I was like, I'm not investing in any repeat founders because, you know, their problems are even worse than the first-time founders. Did you have that experience that there are psychological issues with repeat founders that need to be taken into account?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I meet a lot of founders who want to build their second company in a total different sector or space because they're really excited. And what I always say to them is that if they did have a successful exit in one sector, they obviously know something about that customer that they sold to. And if they can, actually selling again to them is probably better because you have an edge, an advantage. Whereas, you know, even with me, I built this company with a team called Screen Loop, and this was about solving unconscious bias in hiring because it was for the good. Like, you know, this would remove all bias in interviews, and it does. It's brilliant. But, you know, as I was building the product, and as we built as the company was being built, I realized quite quickly that it's just another capitalist business. Like it or not, it's got the same metrics, it needs funding, it's the same. Yes, on that shell, it's great and it's purposeful and it's impactful, it's brilliant. But on the inside, it's still, yes, you're caring about society, but it's still run like a business. And I feel sometimes I meet a lot of founders who are sometimes going into sectors where they're trying to be more impactful, but then they realize it's harder to make money in this sector, or because it's harder to maybe sell to the customer, but at the same time they're realizing, hey, there's no difference between what I was doing before, and they don't have that expertise because it's a new ecosystem. And then they're fighters, they'll carry on because they want to protect their ego. Some will just go, actually, you know what, this ain't working, I'm over. Whereas
exactly, that's more my experience with those I invested in. And then later I talked to them years later, and they were like, oh, that was so stupid of me to go into a different industry. Now I'm back to what I know, and now my business is successful. And I was like, thanks very much. I was the idiot who invested into your experiment early on. And another interesting observation I made through this not very successful financial investments of mine was that sometimes people actually wait for too long to start a new business. And then there's a different problem, that as an investor, I'm thinking that they're the same people who built the first company. But what happened is that they've moved on and they now care much more about having a relaxed lifestyle or focusing on their children. And they started this new business thinking, oh, it's going to be easier second time around because now I can just delegate everything. But it's an illusion. You can't. If I learned anything from my experience and the experience of many other people, it's not easier second time around. It's not, unless there are some exceptions. Like, for example, an older, more experienced founder is very lucky with a co-founder who is very young and wants to do all the work. That's an exception. But in most cases, you have to work just as hard second time around, and they don't want to, and then they're like, I can't be bothered.
Yeah, no, for sure. I've seen that story play out, and I think you're a lot wiser on the decision making. You can hire better people, you've got better processes, but it's still an incredible amount of work. And you know, the tech sector is very interesting because you could be very smart with your capital and build the right products, and next thing you know, you've got this company in the US who's raised 100 million, and then next thing you know, they're undercutting you, and there's just,
and you're out of business. And
so it's I think it's interesting. I meet a lot of people that want to build bootstrap businesses or build it more capital efficient, but the sad truth is I've seen it, what plays out. There'll be another company that comes in, and unfortunately cash is a big lever in a lot of sectors. And the second time founders, sometimes that hunger to like fight in that ring, just they've, hey, look, I've already won the title. Do I really want to carry on being in the ring? They don't want to sometimes.
But then what's interesting is that maybe a few years later, they've gone through their journey. They found their purpose, something that feels right, like what you described with Blissgrowth. And then they're ready. I think timing of investing in repeat founders is extremely important. Not to invest when they're just out of the previous company, but not to wait for too long. Like I know you're very, very sensitive to these things, and I'm curious if you have any rules for yourself in terms of what you want to see, where you want to see your second-time founders in their own personal journeys, when you would feel comfortable investing in them.
I think now, and it goes back to probably earlier in the podcast, like I'm just a lot more patient and I trust the process. So sometimes I'll be with a founder who's exceptional, right? Where people will just throw money at this person like without anything. And I still have that in my mind. I'm like, hey, look, oh my God, this person's incredible. But I'm just, I really want to know how they're thinking. And I will ask them a lot of deep questions, and I'll see if they've done the work. Because at the end, like I think my job in this life is to guide people to the right decision, whether it is working with Blissgrowth or not. I'm okay. Like I know, I'll meet 30 founders every month, and probably only 1 in 50 are supposed to work with me. And I'm okay with that. But as long as the other 49, I feel I've listened to them and told them and been honest that, hey, look, you need to go work on this area still. Like it's not, you haven't done the work. And I you can speak to some of the founders that may know me, but I always say, look, I'm very honest. I'm okay having the hard conversations with them, because in the end, I want them to hopefully be on that right path. So going back to your question, I really will ask them deep questions. And not only am I asking them deep questions on them and their purpose and if they've done the work, but also on the idea as well. So it probably can be quite exhausting with me, because I'm basically challenging them on the idea deeply, and I'm trying to challenge them deeply on the work. And so it's just but I'm doing this because I'm trying to assess where they're at. And I'll meet them multiple times as well. Like I'm in no rush to build companies. I've told my investors, like, we'll build 3 companies a year, but sometimes it might be more, it might be less. I can't, I'm not under any time pressure, and I don't have any institution money. It's all like family offices, high net worth. And I've been honest that, hey, look, this is about patience. So for me, I'm just very careful, because once I start building a company, I know this is a new relationship for life that I'm about to, not for life, but it's going to be a lot. Well, it could be for life, or it's going to be at least 5-10 of serious time. So I'm very careful.
So we talked about you being more loving, and we talked about how much you care about founders you invest in. But how do you think about the closest circle around you? Like, whom do you want to surround yourself with? And what's your logic behind it?
Yeah, I'd say my circle is definitely over time, like everyone gets smaller and smaller. And then eventually the right people come. And like my closest people are my like my brother and my business partners, and I've got quite a lot of cousins. I've got like 40 cousins, which is nuts, right? Indian families are really big. So there's like a few of my cousins I'm
when
like
you
super
say small circle.
Yeah, I know.
By
So,
Indian standards.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm very lucky. I've got a lot of love around me, and so I hold that circle very tightly. And you know, I really appreciate people that are just very kind, loving. They've done the work in their life. They're conscious, and you know, I really feel that the right people come at the right time, and I just trust the process. Before I think we all want to have certain people we think in our life, but I'm starting to let go and just let it all happen. So I don't, before I used to think, okay, I want to build my friendships like this or my circle like this, and I want this layer and that layer, and but I'm just like, I just let it be, and just enjoy that process, just let it happen, just watch the movie take place.
I know you talk to exited founders all the time. You know hundreds of people who sold their companies. If I came to you today and I said, you know what, I sold my business yesterday, what are the things I need to be aware of to go through the transition well?
Yeah, I'd probably say first thing is just spend time connecting with yourself. And you may spend, even if you're in a later stage, there's always more time. I've really like one of the advice and wisdom tips I was given by someone was that, you know, the bigger the goal, the more time you just spend with yourself, because that intuition and that voice will be needed even more. So I'd say spend as much time in that stillness, find that activity, or it might even just sitting on a couch, but just without any distraction, just make sure you have that time. And then I'd probably say actually be part of a community. I think having the right people around you, like having those friends, and obviously the PF communities are a great place that lots of friendships will get formed, and insights. So yeah, that community is really important, and there's so many, obviously your podcast as well. So I just feel being part of a group of people with that are in the same place as you is so important.
Not doing it alone.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I completely agree with you. Those stories that sometimes are horrific that I hear, some people share them in their studio all the time, as people did not have the right support with the family, with friends, with other exited founders. For whatever reason, they were alone in this journey, and then it doesn't go very well.
Yeah, it's
So we have common friends who, you know, went through a divorce at the same time, for example. That's when you are very lonely suddenly, and then you have an exit experience. That's tough.
Yeah, if it's a very, I think after an exit, like, and when you're doing this work, like you do go, and as I said, you're sitting in the fire. It's a dark, and I've tried to make it sound probably nice, but it's a dark place, because you really realize that there is a lot of you know, there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And we all know, like, the reason why I believe we're on this planet is to do that work. So I think we have to, again, going back to the point of evolving, like we have to do this work. I know it's not fun, but like we have to do this work.
Yeah, we also need new skills for a new challenge. So, for example, when you talked about, you know, meditation or yoga or those skills, we need to be connected to our deepest self. That's also a skill. And
it's
then
difficult.
there are lots of practical skills that we actually need to have, like managing wealth.
Yeah, like, you know, my journey of meditation, yoga, all of these was like really difficult at the start. Like I didn't want to do it.
Of course.
It was so hard. But I think enough people had said there's something on the other side. There's something on the other side of the rainbow. The Skittles were there. But yeah.
Well, but also you knew that they were not on this side. You know, when you achieve what you thought was the dream of everyone, you realize that it's not true. It doesn't make us happy. You have to cross something. You have to cross a barrier that most people don't cross.
Yeah, no, definitely.
For sure. Jay, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.
Oh, I loved it too. Thank you. Always with you. All conversations are fantastic.
I appreciate it. Thank you.